I love supercharged engines. I like supercharging much more than turbocharging.
If you love classic cars, then Donald loves you.
It can be a really interesting thing when a manufacturer digs back into their heritage to revive a model. And in this case, the heritage that Ford was seeking to tap into was indeed quite great. The Ford GT40 program of the 1960s that brought the great victory against Ferrari and the other international competition at Le Mans and Daytona, Sebring, all around the world. Certainly something worth celebrating when Ford celebrated their 100th anniversary in 2003. Camillo Pardo designed a car to honor the original GT40 in an updated fashion. Of course, it was also the time when the revival cars were very, very popular. Chrysler and GM also did a number of sort of retro cars at the same time, around the same time. And the reception to some of these cars was rather mixed. However, I have to say that Pardo did a terrific job in capturing the essence of the GT40 and making it also seem like something quite modern. It's also one of those great instances of literally instant classics. It was funny, like many classic cars, or cars that have entered the classic arena, the Ford GT was not a commercial success. It didn't do badly, certainly, but they had planned to build 4,500 of them. The production ended with just over 4,000 built, and the dealers had a bit of a time selling the final ones in their stock. Although, of course, as always the case, the first example sold well over premium, $100,000 over list in some cases. But, and this is a very good thing, many of the cars that were sold were actually used. They weren't just put away as investment pieces. They were actually driven, and for that we can be thankful, because people really began to appreciate the dynamic capabilities and possibilities of these cars. And that's really the thing that keeps a car in the public eye and in the collector's mind. Because today, more than ever, when experiential ownership is really where it's at, it's how a car drives, how usable it is, that really determines how interested people are in the marketplace about it. And the Ford GT of 2005, 2006 stopped depreciating a very long time ago, reached its original retail price in the collector car market a number of years ago, and has been slowly gaining value. Not a rocket by any chance. Of course, its success in the collector car marketplace is also helped by the introduction of the second generation Ford GT in 2017, and the fact that Ford has been racing the new GT, and of course it always makes a big difference when a car is raced. Of course, this car was never raced. Sort of like the comparison, if you were, the Ferrari F40 and Ferrari F50. But it is a car that has a very vocal and loyal ownership group. People who own these cars really do enjoy them. And driving this car, I can see why. First of all, I love supercharged engines. I like supercharging much more than turbocharging, not least of all because of that wonderful sound. You get that whistle with a supercharger that is just wonderful. It sort of takes you back to pre-war Mercedes-Benzes or something, I don't know. But I love a supercharged car. I like the way they deliver power. And this car has enough power to do what you need it to do. It's amazing too, thinking about from the time this car was conceived and produced in 2004, 2005, how far the power sweepstakes have risen. And of course, this is a V8. The new Ford GT is a V6 that puts out more power than this V8 did. But I've said it before, I'll say it again. The It's not just about the horsepower. And this is a really neat car. On these roads, I've driven these roads quite a bit, and one of the characteristics that this particular road surfaces around here has is a very sort of linear paving structure. So you get what they call tram lining, where the tires want to follow the paving lanes in the road, and if a car's suspension is not set up in a way that is linear and stable, you get lots of wander back and forth across the road. In this Ford GT, you feel those paving lines, but it never wants to go along them. It's quite well balanced and well planted. Another thing which I also like about this car, compared to a lot of other production GT sports cars, is the fact that you're very aware of the road around you. You're not isolated the way you can be in certain new Mercedes and Porsches and even McLarens. You really have a sense of the road. Now, of course, some might find that slightly annoying because there is a bit of a drum effect of sound inside the car, but I sort of like that because you're reminding that you're in a car. Of course, it's funny to think about this, the Ford GT, and I think everybody who knows these cars knows about why it's not called the GT40. An example of what I think is monstrously short-sighted thinking, the owners of a company called Saphir GT40 Parts decided that if Ford was going to use the name for a production car, then they wanted $40 million for the rights from Ford for the name. Ford said, thank you ever so much, we'll just call it the Ford GT, and that'll be fine. Plus, it would have actually been slightly dishonest of Ford to call this 2005 car a Ford GT40, because of course the Ford GT40 is called the GT40 because it's 40 inches tall. This is actually, of course, 44 inches tall. That's why I have all this incredible headroom here inside the car. This is what these cars are made for. And you can very easily get into the power band of this car very quickly. Another great example of supercharging. It's instant power on demand. One of the things that is so important about this car and what it represents is a commitment that Ford had to not only looking back to their heritage, but delivering it in a thoroughly modern fashion. And the fact that these are road cars also means a lot because there were very few original road-going GT40s built. And those cars are amazingly prized today because so many of them, quite strangely I think, were converted to replica race cars because I guess people figured who wants a road car that you can't use on the track. But I think that's so incredibly short-sighted. Here you have the absolute feeling of what it must have been like to have one of those raw Le Mans racers, but to drive to the supermarket or to drive to the office. Perhaps not the supermarket because there's no place to put your groceries, but you know what I mean. And they did a wonderful job in this car of making something eminently usable and thoroughly satisfying. In a later video, we'll be driving the new Ford GT, and it'll be interesting to see how these two cars compare. They're built to a different brief and in a different time. So let's see if Ford can make magic strike 3 times.